Christian's here.
E.
What's up, man?
Hi, buddy. How are you?
I'm so glad you did this, and I waited a while to approach you because we were reconfiguring the studio and so forth. I want to get everything right, but I really wanted to talk with you and get your story, of course. But I wanted to talk to you about the way you do business because I've never said this before. We've spent a lot of time together over the years, but I've never said this to you, and I waited to do it on camera. You remind me so much of me when I was in my early 20s, but in a different industry. I was working in a corporate environment, but I understood the idea of service. And again, I don't give myself credit for that. I just had good mentors, but I understood that if I, as a young person, figured out service early and incorporated that into what I do, I could have a decent career, which I kind of did as a corporate employee, and then other things happened. But I really kind of figured that out early, and as soon as I met you, and I think it was 2014 or so, I think I might have hinted that it's something similar to you when I first met you. I might have said this, but I really see a lot of me 25, 30 years ago in you. And I've watched you just soar in this career based upon your ability to provide service. I mean, unmatched service, and that you can hang your hat on that. So take it from me professionally and personally on this show. I've never stopped watching you develop that way. And I knew the first time I met you that incredibly good things were going to happen for you because of the way you just got it. You figured it out. You know, you just did. You figured out if you smile and you're nice to people and you're basically have a mentality of service and helping other humans, the world can open up for you. Yep. And you just figured that out, man.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot, especially coming from you.
No, it's the honest truth. And I wanted to say that here publicly. That's the truth. I mean, and I used to tell anyone they would listen to me, like, that kid has got it figured out. He's going to go. Just watch what happens. And here you are all these years later. In his suit, much dressed better than me, as he's always dressed better than me. He even got that thing that I'd never figured out, which was you got to look the part too, Eric. You got to look the part. Don't be a bum, Eric. But again, buddy, it means a lot to me.
Yeah.
For you to sit and do this. So I want to ask you, I want to get a little bit about your story, of course, and then I want to ask you your thoughts on the idea of service. And I'm going to talk about how we communicate and what society's like, because you've had to maneuver in this, I don't know. You've maneuvered your career in real estate, correct me if I'm wrong, in a pretty much social media drenched society. Is that pretty much accurate?
Yeah, most definitely. It was so when I first got into the industry when I was 17, 18 years old, I was on social media and I stuck out like a sore thumb because social media at that time, 10 years ago, it was not new, but for a kid, it was newer in general. And then for a kid coming into the business, I was really the only one posting. So I had a rare opportunity to make a mark on social media, develop a following, be used as an example at different brokerages and for just young people in general trying to become successful. And I developed, the skill set and the habits and the posting consistency and like finding keywords and stuff that I needed to. And then boom, 2 years later, I was like, everybody is doing this. So we have to consistently find ways to separate ourselves. But I had an early on advantage and I didn't even realize it at that time. You know what I mean?
So were you already like, let me ask you a question. I'm guessing it was Facebook, but Facebook was a little bit of an older demographic?
Yes.
But so you were heavy on Instagram in the beginning of Instagram.
Much more heavy on Facebook, but I was on Instagram as well.
Okay.
And most of, as a young guy, on social media, it was like most of my stuff was on Facebook business, and then I had some personal stuff or whatever on Instagram, and then that quickly switched over because I was like, wow, when people go and look me up, I need to look professional across
the board.
And it's not saying that I was doing anything wrong, but I just needed to I needed to be sharp, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And I blanketed that out pretty quickly and it worked. I mean,
yeah. So let's talk about that. That was 2013.
December
for you?
December 9th of 2013 is when I got my real estate license. And I was an unlicensed assistant before that for 1 year.
Right.
And then, that December 2013, that's where I will never forget. I posted my Howard Hanna name tag and I said like, ready to kill it in the real estate industry. And I got like 109 likes and like 78 comments. And I'm like, I'm a superstar. This is amazing. And I loved it. You know, I did, because I was just like excited, and people were excited for me. And it was in that moment where I said, like, I could do something with this, you know, so let's run.
It was, so what I recognized right away in meeting you, it was attitudinal, and that you had the attitude of positivity. I'm going to flatter the guy all along here, but there was a case in point. I'll point out something. I was at the same brokerage that Christian was when I, as a midlife change for me into real estate. There was an executive from Howard Hanna there that noticed that somebody had walked in. It was a Saturday or maybe even a Sunday morning. It was a special meeting we were having. And someone walked in, and they were looking for directions somewhere. And you jumped out of your seat, ran out. I want to say you actually got in their car with them, and
that's something I would do.
You drove with them to this location, and then they drove you back and dropped you back off the meeting. And then talking with you, yeah, they needed to know. They did. I figured it's easier if they would just, if they wanted to bring me back, it'd be easier, you know. And then you said to me the following, which I thought was fascinating. Yeah, I said they could just drop me off here, and then someone would come and pick me up, but they were kind enough to bring me back. And I'm like, you just told them to drop you off? And you're like, yeah, well, I'd figure it out. And that was the attitude. I'll figure it out. I'll go help these people, make it as convenient for them, and I'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that just kind of told me all I needed to know about Christian Wilhelm at that moment. I mean, I look for things like that. I'm weird like that. But I looked for that tell, and I was like, wow, for someone that, you know, I'm not an old guy talking down on young people, but for that someone that young to get that, it's kind of rare.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems so, and it's a kind of a natural thing that I've always had, giving without expectations, and then I am obsessed with customer service, and I'm good at helping people. You know, I'm very resourceful, I'm very empathetic, so I understand what it's like to be in that position where you're like lost and confused, and any opportunity that I get on a daily basis to help somebody feel more comfortable, and then I do that, and they kind of look at me like, you didn't even expect me to drive you back. And it's like, no, I don't expect anything. If I give you my time, you have my time, and I'll figure out the rest. And I've always been one unit my whole life. So like, yeah, drop me anywhere. I'll survive. I'll be okay.
It's good. Yeah, it's definitely a good attitude. So before you decided to do real estate, I mean, I'm guessing you got your license when you were 20. Is that correct, or 21?
I got my license in December 9th, 2013. So
math.
Yeah, I was 19.
Okay. So before you got your license, I heard that you were doing a crazy amount of jobs.
Oh my God.
Right? Is that right?
I had 9 jobs before I got into real estate, and I was determined to find one that stuck. And I was really good at every single one. So it all started when I was 12 and 13 years old. I started an eBay and Craigslist business. Okay. And I was literally selling things out of my parents' garage, basement. My dad always makes the joke. I was with him the other night, and he goes, I'm telling you, he goes, I told you, your mom and I need to sleep in a bed. You can't sell the bed, Christian. And I'm like, but I have more, I need to sell, you know, my inventory's down this month. So I remember I sold like a horse riding helmet and a bow and arrow, and I mean, Pokemon cards, and just anything that I could get my hands on. And you got to remember, you know, I'm taking these phone calls saying, yeah, you come to my house, you know, I can meet you outside, whatever. And these people would request to talk to my parents because they're like, we see the item, we're talking to Christian, but he's young, you know, do I have permission to buy something from your son? And I'm like, I don't understand what the problem is. So my mom would come down, and, you know, we'd negotiate the deal, and I'd take the cash, and I'd go garbage picking. And I was always driven, you know, as an entrepreneur from a young age. And then,
how'd you get that bug? Where'd it come from?
I don't know. So my dad was in sales his whole life, and when he was on his phone calls and doing different stuff, I would sit at the top of the steps and I'd listen to him and I'd reenact him. But it was probably a part of that, just growing up in that environment. And then also just, it was in my blood. from the day that I was born. I loved it. I loved customer service. I loved being productive. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be successful. And I did that. And then, through high school, had a little stint of very open about it, depression, like most people do anymore, and kind of lost. And then I found a job at Outback Steakhouse, and I remember I started to get that drive back, and I knew that it was back when one day I called my manager. It was my second day after I got the call that I was hired, and they had an online system where you could pick up shifts, but the slot had to be available for you to pick up work. And I called my manager and I said, "Hey, Mandy," I said, "I want to work this week and I don't see anything available." And she was shocked because I guess she was having a hard time getting people to come to work. And she goes, "Well, sweetheart, there has to be slots available for you to pick up a shift." And I said, "Well, is there anything that you guys need done? Is there anybody that doesn't want to work? Because I want to work this week." And she goes, "Not right now, but let me ask around." And I got a shift, and I went, and I was a busboy, and yeah, that's what happened. So, and then after that, I was building grills at Home Depot. I'd worked as a landscaper. I had 9 total different jobs, and then I found real estate, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. It has the customer service aspect that I'm looking for. I could make a lot of money, and I could put myself out there, and then I could network, which is what I really wanted to do, because the more doors that you open up for yourself in life, the more opportunity presents itself as long as you run through it. And I'm like, okay, real estate, making money, practicing my people skills, how to speak, etc. But like, I just started to see all these doors open up with mentors and business people, and knowing people locally, local businesses, understanding the community. It was perfect.
But that networking thing, did you exhibit signs when you were in school as a young person? Were you a big social person in general? Were you a social creature?
Yeah, I definitely was. I was less of a social creature, I'd say, between like 7th grade and like 9th grade. I just kind of lost myself.
Okay.
And then I came back. I took the 9th grade summer to work out. I cut my hair. And then in 10th grade, I was like, all right, I'm coming back as Christian 2.0. Okay. And I did, but I lost myself there for a couple of years. But yes, in general, my parents will tell you that I was normally a liked person. Mm-hmm. I was, extrovert.
Right.
And yeah, I was.
So, it's interesting that you had that foresight to realize that I'll work these 9 things till something sticks, and you had that entrepreneurship bug. But did you ever think about going to school, or did you realize in your head, I'm going to have to work harder because I'm not going to have that degree to compete with?
Yeah, I did. I actually did go to school. Okay. And I thought about it a lot. So I graduated, and then I went to CCAC for 2 years. And I'll never forget, in CCAC, I took a public speaking class that it was that one thing out of that whole 2 years, it totally changed my life. It really just fine-tuned my ability to be able to speak in front of people, stuff like this.
So you liked it?
I liked it. I did, but I only liked that class.
Interesting.
It's like the Steve Jobs thing, like he started to tune into the classes that he really liked, typography and different stuff like that. And I said, okay, this is my path. And I was an assistant at that time in real estate, and I was kind of getting some pressure at home to continue to go to school. So I was thinking about becoming a physical therapist, and then I looked at the schooling and I was like, I can't do that. 8 years, I have to wait 8 years to start making money. I can't. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for business, some type of business. I really didn't know. I don't remember what it was at that time, but I remember walking into my advisor's office, and I had 5, after those 2 years, I had 5 classes that didn't transfer to RMU, and I was going to have to go back for a semester. And I'm not blaming that on the counselor, the advisor, whoever it was on me, because I didn't care enough to pay attention to that. I looked at my mom, I said, hey, I'm going into sales full time. And she was pissed. Oh, she was pissed. A couple years later, we were all grateful that I did, but I thought about it, and then I started winning in real estate, and that thought kind of went away. So,
yeah, it's a tough thing for a kid to make a decision to find themselves in business at the expense of an education from a parental viewpoint going
Correct.
in. It's a tough, I caused my parents a very similar strife. I never completed Robert Morris. We have a very similar background in that regard. 2 years in, and I was kind of like, this isn't for me. I want to make money. I want to earn. I want to do different things. And I get it. I totally get it. So, but now that I'm a parent with 2 kids in college, I'd be mortified if they come and said, hey, they're going to, I love them to death, but if they came and said halfway through, we're going to go do something else, I would be like, I get it. I totally get it. So you start as a realtor, and you had a year of working with different realtors and being from a mentorship kind of standpoint. How important was that year of getting introduced as a non-licensed real estate assistant?
Getting introduced as a non-licensed real estate assistant, it was crucial for me.
Okay.
Because it was a full year of not having the pressure of making a mistake, right? Like
what do you mean?
So I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase that. So within that first year of being an unlicensed assistant, I mean, something as simple as like learning how to open up a lockbox. How do you print out, a sheet from the MLS? When I meet somebody, what do I say? Just going like downtown and to like Hopewell and like learning some of these different areas. It was very simplistic, the things that I was learning.
The mechanics of the job.
The mechanics of the job, right? And I was a very, very nervous person first getting into it. And I was young, and people were making comments and making fun of me and stuff. And I don't think that most of those people meant to offend me, but I was taking things very personal because I was like, I'm young. Like, I know that I have a baby face. I know that I don't have any facial hair. I know that I'm probably the youngest person to ever do this.
He did look very young in the beginning, yes, I will say.
Yeah, I'm maturing in my older days now.
He was always a good-looking kid, but he's maturing now.
Yeah, so I'm a seasoned agent now.
You certainly are.
After 10 years.
You certainly are.
But it was hard, and it let me get all that anxiety out of the way. Obviously, there was much more learning to do after that, but it was just a good base year of like, this is what you're doing. You're going to meet people. This is how it works. And then after that first year, I just felt really ahead of the game. I felt it helped me build confidence.
Well, you probably didn't have the weight of those, those mechanics. Didn't have the full weight of them, the impact of them, because they weren't really for you because you were unlicensed.
Correct.
Yeah, so I get it. So I guess maybe the stress level would be mitigated a bit for the first year.
Yeah, and even things like, Christian, that we feel that this property is priced too high. And I'd say something along the lines of like, well, I understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, I'm unlicensed and I can't speak on behalf of that, but let me call someone that can talk to you regarding that. So, and then I would go back and I would overhear them have that conversation. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to say this next time, the market placement, where you need to be at. Okay. And then after a year, I'd have that same, I'd have to overcome that objection. And I'd say, well, I'm happy that you asked. And here's why it's priced the way that it is. I mean, it was just really good practice, and it removed the pressure.
Why do you think there's not more of that? Because I've not observed a lot in my, about eight years now of being in the real estate business. I've not observed a lot of unlicensed assistants, at least not very active unlicensed assistant positions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think a couple reasons. I was definitely very lucky to be put in that position, and I'm very thankful for that year. Mm-hmm. The reason that I don't think that you see unlicensed assistants nowadays is because everybody needs somebody to be able to go and open up a lockbox, and you have to be licensed to do that.
Okay.
And it's
okay.
I had 10 years ago, we had the fob. Mm-hmm. Do you remember? It wasn't on your phone. Mm-hmm. It looked like a Game Boy.
That's my first year of being a realtor. I remember they were still around.
Yeah, so I could go pick up the fob and I could just go let people in.
Got it.
Hope the West Penn Multilist isn't watching this. That was 10 years ago. I'm grandfathered in.
100%.
But I think that's one of the reasons why. And then two, I mean, think about, someone as an unlicensed assistant, you have to pay them a lot of money. And there's just not a ton of younger people, I don't think, out there that are like really, really interested in getting in the mud and, seeing this thing from a bird's eye view and saying, okay, if I could eat crap for a whole year in 5 years, where will I be at? It's hard to get somebody to see that. I was always kind of built like that. Like I always understood value, but it's hard to, it's a select few in my opinion.
I think you're right. And I think it might have even been a little easier 10 years ago than it is today. I would imagine today with the way social media runs, there's the amount of immediacy, which we all of us, but especially the younger generations being shown all the time. The immediacy of the illusion of success does not create a want, I don't think, to get in the mud and the start
Correct.
grinding it out, so to speak.
Because it's like, no, this should be easy. Like I feel that people nowadays feel very like deserving,
So you feel there's a level of entitlement?
Definitely. And I hate the word deserve because I feel like we should just be grateful to be here as we are right now, living, being able to walk, to talk, to eat, to stuff like that. But yeah, deserve is a bad word. And it's very rare that I see somebody that I say, hey, you get it. Like you can see this 2 or 3 years down the road. And, it's, there's definitely a level of entitlement there with a lot of people that I meet nowadays.
So I don't know if the word entitlement, I mean, the word entitlement is certainly on my radar now in 2022 when I look around at this culture we're in. I don't know if the entitlement word was prevalent with me observing you for the first time in regards to your age group. But I remember in the 2000s, the company that I did a lot of work with was Washburn Guitars, and they were based out of Chicago, and they had a lot of positions open during that time because they were growing and doing things, and they had an incredibly difficult time finding people that would actually work and want to learn the guitar making craft. They were starting to bring in kids, and I say kids, younger people, either out of high school or out of college, and there was an expectation of more immediacy of gratification, more money, more. And I started to see it back then, but it wasn't really real prevalent. And it wasn't even that prevalent when I met you, but I realized that you understood at a very young age, okay? But now I don't see any of that anywhere. I want to. I yearn to see, I'm sure there's examples of it out there. I'm just not familiar with any. It just seems very much now a society where people expect things to either come easy or they feel entitled to success, whatever their illusion of success is in their mind, that society owes them success. I mean, it's a harsh thing to say. I don't mean to say it critically, but no. I have to tell you that's my observation now.
Yeah, and to play devil's advocate with all of it, it's like, look at the society that we're in. Everything is instant message, instant text message. If I'm on Google and I go to call somebody to frame one of those pictures and they don't pick up, I got access to just call somebody else, and I'm going to, because I'm wired like that as well, to a degree. Sure. And it's the environment that we all live in, so you can't really blame people for like seeing it that way, but you do have to take a step back and say, hold on, I'm not deserving. Nobody owes me anything. I used to be a person where I thought that the world owed me something. I failed miserably, walking around with that mindset. And you said that you've always seen me as a positive person.
The time that I've known you.
In the time that you've known me. Right. And I was actually kind of like a negative, cynical person. And I did always feel like a victim in life sometimes. And I did feel like I was owed. And then when I finally let that go and said, I'm responsible for everything that I do. Like, I have to take extreme ownership for this, and I got to eat crap, and I got to want to win, and I have to be different, and I have to, take the extra few seconds on that email or that text message or that phone call, or find a way to differentiate myself. Like, that's when I leveled up. But it's just a hard thing to do. I've been there as well. I understand most of this world because I was there. Thank God I got out of it, you know?
The word humility keeps coming back to me because in my life, I had plenty of opportunities to let ego run wild, and I did at times. But all the great success I've ever had and all the truly wonderful moments in my life were where I led with humility, found somewhere in there to use humility and to show that, and all the good stuff came from that. And that's what like this show, we talk with people like this, and the only way I could do this is I got to come in there with the idea, like I'm doing tonight, to learn about that person. I have to come in with immense humility that I don't know anything. I'm here to absorb every possible thing I can. And by trying to keep that at the forefront, that's why we keep doing the shows, because it's been fantastic. But the same thing with learning a new craft or learning something. I just don't know where, as a society, we seem like we've lost that that idea that if you lead with the humility, if you go into a venture with humility, go into a relationship with humility, and you're willing to absorb and be genuine, the whole world can open up for you. But man, I just don't think we do that very often anymore.
No.
I don't get it.
Yeah, and it's, we all have egos, especially as guys, right? And it's like...
You don't say.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's one of those things where, you kind of have to like push the envelope to see how far you could push it and like what's good and what's bad. And then you're like, okay, well, I handled this situation like this and the feedback wasn't so great. So like, I need to burn part of this, of myself off because, being egotistical and like malevolent and all those other things, it doesn't really work. And people, it's ugly. It's just an ugly way to be. And, there was a time in my life where, I started making money at a very young age. I became a little bit arrogant, it was hard. I mean, I was 20, 21 years old making a lot of money and my head was getting blown up from everybody around me. And I didn't know how to keep that in check. And I think that's one of the reasons why I still just give without expectations and help everybody that I can, anybody that calls me. Like I need to keep myself in check because it's easy to let that go. And it's just a very ugly way to be. And yeah, being humble wins. It always wins.
Did you have a moment that you were like, whoa, I need to find a little humility, or I need to put myself in check, or that wasn't a good... Was there one moment that you can remember where it kind of just changed your viewpoint on it?
Yeah, I'm trying to... There has been a couple moments where that has happened. And I mean,
it's a tough question to ask.
Yeah,
I know that, but
I'm trying to pimp, because I normally do remember there's moments like that in life to me are defining moments, right? Like you can either go left or you can go right. You can continue to be this way, or like I was just talking to someone the other day about people that make mistakes and people that repeat patterns. And you make mistakes and then you learn and you grow. But people that repeat patterns are very, very dangerous. And I do believe that people really don't change. But at the same time, I believe that people do learn. But like sometimes the world and life events and everything else can make you egotistical and arrogant and cynical and malevolent and all those other things. And it happened to me when I was in my early 20s, and then it happened to me when I was like 24. If the specific moments come back, I'll let you know. But I've experienced it, and I'm glad that I did. I have no regrets about anything, because now, like, I manage a team of 26 people, and I have a couple young rock stars on my team, and they're the same thing, and they're young, and they're good looking, and they're hungry, and they're making money. And I'm able to see from the outside in, I'm able to see that football field from the outside in and say, okay, he's going here. Stop. Hey, let me bring you back down a little bit. And they're able to make smart moves and learn from my mistakes. And that is like a big part of my why, because I know that I'm making a difference somewhat.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, if you can't, oh my. So Rocco Koza, my attorney friend, and I, we do a show on entrepreneurship on Beaver County Radio once a week. And the reason I agreed to do this show was because I have a landscape of mistakes. All the entrepreneur ventures, the guitar business, multiple things, even in real estate. But if I can't, some of the mistakes sting over time, and that's just life. But the way I mitigate any pain with that is I share those mistakes along the entrepreneur journey.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone gets anything out of that, or that revelation or sharing that mistake saves someone else the pain that I went through, then to me it's all worth it. And we've had, Rocco and I both have conversations back through this show of people saying, hey, I was getting ready to do this and I heard that you guys had this problem and I didn't make that mistake. Just one person telling you they learned from your mistake is immensely gratifying. It's hard to I think you get it because you've done that with your own team.
Yep.
But until it actually happens to you, the gravity of that is just, it's really something. It's extremely, it almost makes the pain of going through the mistakes personally okay.
It does.
Because someone else has benefited from the learned behavior.
Right.
You know?
Right. And when I think that, the universe lets you see that when you learn from the mistake. Like if you're humble enough to say, you know what, I'm not perfect and I made a mistake and I shouldn't do that again and I'm not going to do that again. And like we're very unconscious people, like sometimes we do things and we don't even recognize that we're doing it until it's like, oh my God, I hurt somebody's feelings, or like they didn't take that well, or somebody got angry with me. But yeah, I think when you learn, the universe kind of pays you back, and it allows you to teach people and be able to witness from the outside in. And it's a great way to like deepen your empathy, because when you feel that pain after you've done something, or just have been arrogant or offended somebody or whatever, and you feel that, you're really able to help it sink in with the other person, because you're like, I need to put up this fence, because I'm telling you, if you go over this cliff, I have been there through my experience. It does not feel good. So why would I want you to do that? But at the same time, and here's the thing that also there's a very fine line, and especially with teaching people, I think sometimes you have to get burned to learn. Mm-hmm. So how far do you push it? Like I'm not going to let one of my agents get sued.
It can be painful for the teacher watching all that unfold.
Oh, it sucks. I mean, it keeps me up at night. Like there's a million examples that I could give, again, just in my profession, what I do on a management side. Like I'm not going to let you get sued, and I'm not going to let us lose tens of thousands of dollars or put anybody at risk. But like, I need to let you go right here, because next time when this happens, you need to be able to go back and say, like, this experience did not feel good, and I'm not going to go there. But I'm going to protect you just enough, but I'm not going to push you over the edge. And learning that is a skill, and it's very tough, and it takes a lot of time.
Well, you're learning as a manager that those you manage need to actually sometimes feel the pain to learn, as opposed to learn about the pain through your words. Because sometimes trying to learn the pain doesn't have enough impact on them. They've got to actually feel it.
You got to feel it.
Yeah.
You got to feel it. And I believe that, leadership is a very tough thing. And I think that, you look at a lot of great leaders and they have just been through a lot of life. And whether you're old or young or middle-aged or whatever, it's like about the experience that you had, And I always, anytime anything happens to me now, I always look up and say, what is this teaching me? Thank you for this experience, because I know that I have the capacity to handle a lot. Mm-hmm. And being a leader, you got to take on a lot, and you got to give as much as you can. And, you go through a lot, and it's never perfect, right? Like you go through a lot of those things and you have to teach, but, like it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, but you just have to learn how to manage it. So
in my journey, I never had the compunction to manage anybody. I left corporate America in '99 with a company called PageNet, or Pagers. Remember those? You were probably very young.
My dad had one.
Yeah, there you go. See, but that was my last corporate job. I did pretty well in sales, and then they wanted me to manage a small group of salespeople, which I was just like, wait, I can't manage. I mean, I wouldn't want to be managed, and I can't manage salespeople. How's that work? It's like herding cats. But I never had to once I got my taste of it, I didn't want it. So I've never had the compunction to manage people. You made a decision that you wanted to do that. My question to you is, like, at what point did you decide that that was a challenge you wanted to take on? Because, in this business, you can make a really healthy living being a one-man show with a couple assistants.
Yep.
You could, I mean, there's
kill it.
How many people doing that, right? So when did you decide, or what brought you to the point that you decided you wanted to grow an organization, something bigger than yourself?
So I accidentally fell into it, right? Because I was at a point in my real estate career where I was so busy that I couldn't handle anymore. And I wanted to handle more, and I was very stressed, and I'm a very organized, process-orientated, structured, everything's labeled perfectly kind of person. And
a little bit OCD.
A little bit, like to the 10th degree, if you know.
That's
me.
why it's probably driving him crazy to sit here, right?
No, this is very symmetrical. It's good.
Oh, really?
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, sure.
I mean, look at these lights; they're perfectly in line.
They're not all perfect, but so if I put this over here, it's going to bother you.
Oh God, don't do that to me, please. I'll have a meltdown. But I accidentally fell into it because I was like, okay, I need help, and I was fortunate to meet my business partner in March of March of 2019 at a new construction event. And when I tell you we had no idea what we were doing, I was like, okay, if I bring more people on, I'm going to have less stress, you know? And then I brought another person on. We started getting more business. And I'm like,
how's that work?
This isn't supposed to. And then I brought an agent on. And I'm like, this agent's going to save me time. And then I started getting phone calls every day. And I started spending twice the amount of time. And I'm like, what the hell? This is not what I thought it to be. But then I started to find it interesting because there is definitely something to be said about making a lot of money. And money, in my opinion, is a problem in life that needs to be solved. But I was just chasing money. And I was running up a hill that, was bigger than Mount Everest, and I was never going to see the top of it. So I've always had that passion for helping people. Like, I think that we all like to help people, right? But to be able to
be a realtor without having that,
right? I mean, it has to be on your resume. But I wanted to be able to bring value to people when I was so passionate about the things that I was taught earlier in my career in that mentorship aspect. And I'm like, these people have to know this. I mean, it's like a secret sauce. It's my recipe. And if they don't know this, they're going to fall over that cliff, and they're not going to be protective if they don't have these forms. And you have to learn how to communicate. And like, this is such an important industry where you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. And like, I need to teach this, So then as I started seeing other people learn from me, and then me learn from other people, I was like, this is really cool. And then it kind of just took off from there. Now, I will say that it's another part of it is I'm a person that loves to be challenged, and failure is not in my blood, and I like to feel like I won. And I was able to figure out the customer service aspect of the business, but when it came to managing people, I mean, it was hard. Like, I remember my first couple meetings, I just talked about motivation. And like, it's the stuff that I'm interested in, right? But I wake up at 4:30 and I listen to these speeches, and you get outside.
He really does that.
And you go run, and you sweat, and you don't sleep for 2 days. And I'm sitting there, and these people are looking at me like
David Goggins,
right? And they're like, we just want to pick up a client. Like, we want a paycheck. Like, you're a psycho. And one of the agents actually told my manager at the time, and he told me, and I was totally devastated. And I'm like, okay, so we're not compatible, right? Like, but maybe there's another way that I could find a way. I need to figure this out.
To reach them.
I wanted to reach them, right? And then when I started to find ways to bring value, it made it all worth it.
Yeah. So, I mean, your organization grew pretty quick, and you had to get your arms around a lot of activity in a very short period of time. So that, I would guess, that was in the early moments of that was pretty intense. Yeah. Because we're all on the outside looking in going, how the hell are they doing that?
Right. Yeah, it was a lot. And to be honest with you, I don't really know how we did it. I don't really know where to go with that. Like, give me a little bit more context about wrapping your arms around.
It seemed to me like your real estate team grew so fast, and maybe it's because of my
yes.
Maybe Christian, it's because of my adversity to management and just never wanting to be responsible for other humans. I want to help other humans. I don't want to ultimately be responsible for them. So maybe to me it looks like this very daunting task, but it just looked like there was a huge amount of humans to corral and organize and get out there in a quick time period.
Yep. Yeah, when we first started, we had one agent that we brought on board, and then we brought on one more, and then we brought on Nate at the time was unlicensed, and he contacted me through Instagram. And I'm like, same approach. I'm going to save the world. I'm going to help everybody. So everybody that would contact me, I'm like, hey, here's how you get into your classes. And before you even get your license, come into the office. You can sit with us. You can take my time. I'll train you. You can, hang out at our meetings.
Right.
And then we'd walk in and the room was full. And I was a very good salesperson, but I didn't have a fantastic business sense of how to manage people and bring them value and give them actually what they needed. Because I just thought that being here and around this environment was like cool, but no, people were like quitting their jobs to like come and do this.
Yeah.
And I totally just didn't really realize that, but we grew really fast. And it's easy to say that, everything happens for a reason, because I really believe that it does. Like every experience that I have, the people that I have now, I mean, wouldn't trade it for the world. I really wouldn't, but we grew too fast. And one of the things that we were talking about, like getting burned, I was getting burned because I was still selling, and I was under so much stress from like, I need to give these people what they need. And I didn't even take the time to figure out what that looks like yet. So yes, it was the growth, the trajectory was unanticipated, but it worked and we figured it out.
Well, it obviously worked. Yeah, it obviously worked. Anyone that really wants that level of complexity, with that huge management component, is fascinating to me, because there's just nothing in my soul that would want me to do that.
It's hard. It
just appears unbelievably difficult to me.
It's really difficult. I feel like if you can figure that out, a lot of other things in life for me have become easier.
Interesting.
Personal relationships, being able to just have like a sixth sense about people, and like any situation that I'm in now, I'm immediately, what do they need and how do I give it to them? I kind of just cut out the fluff, and it's helped me in a lot of other aspects of my life, because it took so many years to just figure it out. But it's hard, and people are very emotional, sensitive creatures. People take things very personally. You and I talked a little bit earlier about how communicating something with someone over a text message versus doing it in a phone call, there could be two totally different dynamics there on how somebody takes it, because tonality in communication is very important. I just recently had a situation where I made a phone call. There was an opportunity that I had on the table for somebody. It didn't work out, and I just wanted to get it off of my to-do list. But I knew in that moment that I should have just taken the time to find them, drive there, sit down and say, hey, like, let you see that I really care about this. But I took the easy way out. Again, I make mistakes every single day. I'm humble enough to admit that, and I'm grateful for the learning opportunity. But we sat down on Monday. Today's Monday. We sat down last week, and they were like, "Hey, I was really offended that you called me instead of taking the time to just sit down with me."
Right.
And I'm like, "You're right. I should have done that." So
you're not going to hit a home run every time.
You can't.
Yeah,
and
that's the thing.
And it's better to do something than to just sit there and stir and do nothing. But you're constantly reminded that you have to be gentle with people. You have to.
Let me ask you this: when talking with younger agents, or let's say brand new agents, or let's say in their first year, and they're still learning. I mean, they're still in the mud. They're just flopping around in the mud. How do you discuss the methods in which they communicate with their client and getting them to understand? Is there any tells? Is there any process to that? I mean, I realize every customer, every human's different. Not only is the client different, but the agent's different too. Mm-hmm. And there's no one size fits all. But man, there needs to be some serious delineation between, okay, this is a textable thing, this is a messageable thing, this is a voicemail, this is a phone call, this is a personal visit. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to put any kind of cookie cutter process in that?
There probably is, and that probably should be on paper in our organization, if you will. I don't have one specifically. I try to spend enough time around them that they kind of like pick up on, hey, this, you can text about this, but like, hey, if you're in a multiple offer situation and this was their dream home and they lost it, our process says that you pick up the phone and call and be empathetic. If it's a very, emotional seller and the inspection comes back, go to their house, sit down with them, go through the inspection report, let them see that you care enough to give them your time. I don't have a process for that. I kind of just hope, which hope is not a good strategy, that my teammates pick up on it. And the good thing about it is we've built a culture around, process and doing things. Our mission statement is do the right thing for the client every time, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I beat that into their heads. And I think that we at least have a culture enough where if you're around that environment, you kind of start to pick up, this is textable, this should be in person, this should be a phone call. It's a hard thing to put on paper.
Yeah, I would imagine. I didn't even expect that you thought that was even possible, because to me, I think every agent's different, every circumstance is different, and they're different in the way they communicate. Like some people think they are articulate enough to get this out effectively and emotionally in a text, whereas I might look at that and go, "There's no way I'm not calling that person." You see, but it's so I don't know how you would. I mean, you couldn't demand that, well, if this is the circumstance, you must call this client. Well, how do you do that, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, and it's, you put small things in front of them. Like I'm very big on semantics and like keywords. So teaching them to say things like, this is our process. I understand. If I were in your shoes, I would feel the same way. Empathetic. And say it like that. Right. So like a couple of those keywords with empathy. And then when I'm in conversation with them, I'll kind of beat that into their head. And if we're in a conversation and they respond to me in a certain way, and I'll say, hey, did you ever think about saying it like this? Mm-hmm. And then, 2 days later, I'll overhear them on the phone, well, this is our process. And if I were you, I would feel the exact same way. And they really mean it, but that's the way that I teach it.
And that's good for you. I mean, then that's reaffirmation that you're getting through.
Yes. Yeah, and you need that because sometimes as a manager, you're like, I know that our sales are good. I know that most people are making money, but they kind of look at you like, hey, you're the guy, or like you're the leader and you need to continuously be teaching us. But sometimes it's nice to say, hey, the way that you taught me that really made a difference for me today.
Certainly.
And it's like, okay, I'm on the right path. You feel like you're floating sometimes. It's tough.
So, we have regular texting through the carrier. Then, of course, there's iMessage and Google texting. Then there's Instagram. Then there's Facebook Messenger. Then I guess, does LinkedIn have their own messaging service? I mean, it seems like no matter where you turn, there's all these different channels. And I struggle sometimes. I would prefer not to use, Facebook Messenger, but it's a thing. You have to be aware of it. Instagram has their own messaging service. So yeah, we're getting hit from so many different ways. And my point of my question is, I think that might lead a younger agent to believe that, well, so much of my communications can be done electronically. That might really de-emphasize personal communication. Is that a struggle that you have?
Yeah, definitely. Because like you said, you can't avoid it. You have to do it, and you have to be good at it, and it has to be in front of your face almost all the time, especially when you're first starting out, because you don't want to miss a message. But it's like I was fortunate enough to learn the communication skills and then bring that into instant messaging. I couldn't imagine trying to reverse engineer that to the physical communication side. But it definitely is a struggle because I don't think that, and again, without those experiences or getting burned and, hey, you really should have sat down with me instead of calling me, it's like, this is just how the world works. I don't understand why I need to waste my time explaining this. But it's so important, and they have a good point. Everybody does it, and there's power in numbers.
There is, yeah. And I had to come to texting kicking and screaming. I was a big email guy through the 90s and the 2000s, but then when texting became, and you'll laugh, Christian, I ended up having to go through texting because I found myself divorced a second time and out in the dating pool, and all these women wanted to communicate via text, and I'm like, you gotta be shitting me.
You had to bring the game to the screen.
I had to, yeah, I guess. But then that really served it up nice when I became a realtor. Then I realized that was just modus operandi. And texting is great for the appropriate communication. It makes life convenient and easy, but I find myself even having the wrong conversation sometimes via text, and I have to correct and pick up the darn phone and say, listen, I need to really talk to you about this. And I think that, but again, I think with my generation only having phone at one time, it's easier for me to do that. I find, and maybe I'm wrong, but I find folks in their late teens and 20s, a lot of them don't want to talk on the phone, period. There's almost an anxiety if they have to do it. Mm-hmm. Is that just in my head, or is that reality?
No, that's total reality. It's total reality. And the reality of it all is some phone calls are awkward. They're just awkward. I mean, like, it was really hard in the beginning of my career to pick up the phone and call someone and follow up with them and say, hey, how are things? How's the house? How's the kids? I mean, it's so important. It was just easier to send a text message. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like, I would feel like I was bothering people. I didn't know what to say. And then the day that I said, half of these phone calls are just going to be awkward, but this is a part, how I motivated myself to do it, other top producers do this. Mm-hmm. So if you don't do it, I mean, what more can you ask for? The wheel is already created. This is what works. So if you don't do what works and you don't practice it and you don't get good at it, I'm not saying that you'll be a complete failure, but you're going to miss a big piece of what can help you be successful. And those people forget what you do, and they might call the wife of the person across the street to list their house. You might lose tens of thousands of dollars.
It only happens to you once before you learn the lesson. I mean, it happened to me.
Sucks.
Early on, I sold a client. I was always friendly with them. I waved. They were in my hometown. I'd wave to them, and everything was great. They loved the house, and they got relocated. The husband got relocated, and 2 years later, there was someone else's sign in the yard. And I realized I did not do my own due diligence, so, to stay in touch with this. It was completely on me.
It always comes back down to us.
But if you're paying attention, it only happens once because you learn.
You learn.
It doesn't happen again.
And then you learn, like, we have 24 hours in a day. Like, it's such a small, it could be a 2-3 minute conversation once a month, once every 2 months, send them a quick gift, whatever. Right. Letting people know, staying in front of people. People forget. There's a million things going on in today's world.
But we have no excuse now, and I find that social media, especially Facebook it's more geared toward my demographic, it's just an easy way to keep in touch with so many people, and I really enjoy it. I mean, I'll put my hand up. I don't bash Facebook because for all the ills it brings, it's brought an immense quality to my life.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew a guitar business on it. I run a web show. I mean, and I just love the interaction with people.
Yeah.
But there's no excuse not to stay in touch with folks anymore if you're immersed in social media. Shame on you if you're a realtor and you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Is my thought at this point.
To.
So I want to ask you about having success early. You were making a lot of money at a very young age. I was 30-ish starting this web business, and because it was new, Christian, and the web was new, and I was doing something that really no one else was kind of doing, I had a lot of success early. I look back on that as being the worst possible fucking thing that could have happened to me. Because I look back on it now, it's because it made my ego grow. It made me somewhat a little bit lazy. It kept me from learning about different guitar brands and expanding because I was making good amount of money doing the same thing over and over again. It didn't help propel me to be aggressive in my learning. I would have preferred, I think, to struggle for the first couple of years and slowly grow. I would have become a better entrepreneur had that happened to me. Now, maybe that's not the case with real estate, but with the business I was in, retail, I had too much success too early and it didn't serve me well. Mm-hmm. I'm just I wanted to get your thoughts if you have time to reflect back on your first couple of years.
Yeah. Definitely. So when I was first asked what I wanted out of life, I'll never forget this day. I was in a passenger seat. Person said, what do you want out of life? And I said, I want a really big house and I want to drive a really nice car. And then I started to learn a little bit more about like lifestyle and things outside of like stuff that money could afford, but how do you want to live your life? Like, how do you want to live your day to day, right? But I was still just hyper focused on money. And I started to make a lot of it. And it was fixing a lot of problems in my life. It was fixing a lot of problems in my life. And then I started to see a ton of opportunity that would come from it, but it did the same thing to me. It made my head big. I wanted to be cool. I wanted to buy things for people. I wanted to be the person, to tell all my friends that I could buy them drinks when we would go out and stuff. And I remember wanting everyone to know that I had an assistant. Like it was I remember bad. It was bad. Like I appreciate that experience, but I did not like that version of Christian because, again, money was making my head really, really big. And then to your point of like kind of losing yourself in it because your learning stopped, there's a lot of things I'm 28 years old. There's a lot of things that I'm like, man, I really wish that I would have started learning that a couple years ago, but I was so hyper focused on let's get the next paycheck, let's get the next deal under contract, and I'm running a million miles an hour. When maybe I could have referred a couple of those things out, maybe I could have taken a step back and made time for what I like to do. And then I got to a point where I burned out terribly and crashed and burned, and it was because I was lacking purpose in my life again. Mm-hmm. I'm doing the same thing every single day. I'm running up Mount Everest looking for money, and I'm not happy. And why am I not happy if I'm making all of this money? I mean, I have all of this money, and I feel like I suck. So now I'm taking a couple hours a day to like actually do things that I'd like to do. Like I would never do this before because I had to go show a house. I had to go get that next deal. My competition's out there and I need to win.
We couldn't even get coffee. You were so busy.
I know. But you learn that stuff is not as important as just feeling good. Like knowledge is power and you got to feel good. And if you're not, it's like you have the different
relationships
cups.
Too.
Yeah. I was pouring, all of my water was poured into the real estate cup. My family life, my personal life, what I like to do, what I was passionate about, it was totally empty. And I was totally miserable, and rightfully so. But like we learn and we grow, I'm going to take that cup and I'm pouring a little bit in more each day. It's still kind of tough to get out of like, how habitual real estate can be, right? I mean, you can wake up 16 hours later, you're like, I didn't do anything that I needed to today for me. But it's recognized, and I will never get myself back to that part again because I know what it's like to crash and burn. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and it's I think the toughest thing ever is managing oneself. I read a little series of books years ago. I don't know if the name Peter Drucker rings in your bell. There's a lot of motivational people out there. But he wrote a lot of corporate style management books. That's what he was known for. But he had a little book called Managing Oneself. And it's a little throwaway book, maybe like 25 pages, but I must have read this thing in my life maybe like 100 times. It just talks about managing yourself and managing your time and doing things for yourself and creating those buckets and so forth. And I'm not perfect at it, but the point I'm trying to make is if you really work in one big bucket, you may tell yourself you have 5 different buckets, but if you're really only kind of driving and circling in one big bucket, that bucket is eventually going to find a leak. And when it leaks, it's going to be empty. Mm-hmm. No matter how big the flipping bucket is, it will be empty. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that is, in real estate, I got obsessed for a couple of years and did really well. I thought, like, wow, this is like amazing. This is easy. But eventually, if it's not healthy, if other aspects of your life suffer because of it.
Yep.
And I wasn't too old to make that mistake. I get it. Man.
Yeah, it's life happens.
When you're younger and you have, before you're married, before you have different kinds of relationships and responsibilities, it's easy to be immersed in something. You have to fight the obsessiveness all the time. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, and I think a big part of my growth out of that was just maturity too. I mean, I have been mature from a young age, but again, like
I always thought so. Yeah.
I was mature, but I needed the experiences to teach me that this is how you live a good life. This is how you feel good. And it's hard removing because I am a very obsessive, needing to win, wanting to be the best. Mm-hmm. I want the award. I want the money. But there's a way to have that and to have the other stuff too. And managing time is tough, especially in today's age where we're all so easily accessible. I mean,
are we too accessible?
Oh, totally. Well, we're too accessible and people's expectations are so super high. And then we set really, really high expectations of ourselves. And then, you know, if we miss a message and we lose the deal, what do? We beat the hell out of ourselves about it. We're like, man, I should have been on my phone. But like, you were at dinner with your family. Like, in that moment, that was more important than taking that message, you know? And you can't win them all. I have not won every deal in my life. I don't know any agent or business person that ever has. And you can't be so hard on yourself. You know, you have to accept that those things are just going to happen, and you just continuously keep the ball moving forward.
Yeah, there's no cycle of business. And I will tell you, before 95-ish, when the web became a thing, there was a cycle of business. There was, you know, I mean, yes, stores and retail was open Saturday and Sundays to some degree, but the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday was kind of a thing. And that sales cycle was, you didn't expect to lose a deal because you were not available over the weekend before the web. The web kind of changed all that.
Yeah. And now, I mean, look at the media now, you know, like all the motivation accounts and stuff that I follow. It's, you know, have a side hustle. You know, if you're not waking up at 3 a.m. and working on the weekends, your competitor is. I mean, they have made it cool to literally kill yourself. And
it's a fallacy.
It is. And it's like, no, like, yes, you should wake up early and you should work hard and you should do those things. But your trajectory has to be here. You know, like, if you go up here, I've done it. If you go up here, you're going to fall just as fast and just as deep. But slow and steady wins the race. You know, continuous small wins, like buildings slow. This is a long ride. It's a long ride in business.
So maybe the organization decision was really good for you because, you know, it kind of, just by the way an organization grows, generally, it is more of a slant as opposed to a spike. Individual production can be huge spikes because you're only responsible for your own action.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, that just seems logical to me, but that management thing is I mean, God bless you, man. Because I mean, oh God,
it's a bear, man. But it's worth it for me.
Yeah. So I get the feeling though that you like to teach.
I do.
Either it's directly or indirectly. Is that correct?
Yeah, totally. I don't know exactly why. Again, like if I have something in me and I feel like it's valuable, I'd like need to scream it from the mountaintops. I can't sleep until I get it out of my system and like, let me show you this. Like, this is so cool. And some people think it is and some people think that it isn't. But yeah, that's always been, I've always just liked to do that. It helps me get up in the morning. It's part of my why, and it just feels good.
We both were agents, you know, through the pandemic. I do have to ask you this, code, because we haven't really talked in detail since then. Where were you, and what was going on at the time you get the phone call, basically telling us it was official? You can't work right now. You can't open a lockbox. You can't continue with, at least initially, you couldn't continue with closings. You were pretty much at a standstill. Number one, could you actually wrap your head around that, the magnitude of that? And then number two, where were you? What was going on?
I will never forget that day. So I was in the basement of my old office, and I was sitting behind my desk, and my team was in the room, and we got the notification that we couldn't show houses. We couldn't, we got the notification that we couldn't show houses. And I hung up the phone. It was a phone call or an email or something, and I just kind of like looked at everybody. And my business partner, Nick, throws up his hands. And he walks, and he's outside, and he's pacing up and down. And my other teammates at the time are in there, and they're like, "So what do we do now?"
Right.
And again, the world has never experienced this before, so there was no process of like what the hell to do. Secretly in the back of my mind, after 8 years of 16 hours a day showing houses, real estate, I'm like, I'm never going to get this opportunity again. I have the best excuse. It's not even an excuse. I can't work. So I need to like make this a positive thing. And I wasn't happy about what was going on, but I was like, hey, there's a silver lining here. Like, you know, I've been wanting some extra time to figure some things out. Maybe this is it. You know, maybe this is a sign from the universe that I needed. And I mean, obviously COVID was a super unfortunate thing, but, yeah, that happened. We were all totally lost, and we started to find ways around it, right? Like everybody was working during COVID and sellers were letting buyers in and things were happening. And then we were selling houses so fast.
It got insane.
And people were and prices were skyrocketing and people were coming in with cash and no contingencies. And then the home projects started. And then the contractors were too busy and then the supply chain started to back up. And it was like happening so fast all at once.
Gonzo.
And in the heat of that, like again, anytime that something like that in life happens, there's an opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. And I looked at everybody and I said, sell as fast as you can. Get as much out of this that you possibly can because we will never see this again once it subsides. And you know just as well as I do, it was a pretty long ride. Like it was
longer than I thought it would be.
Like we were putting on booties and masks and gloves to go show houses and people were using Matterport and FaceTime and doing sight unseen offers.
I never saw so much cash floating around in the marketplace. I mean, I don't mean like money. I'm talking pure cash.
Yeah.
It was insane.
It was totally nuts. And we had an amazing year and we were still able to service a lot of people. You know, we stayed safe through it. Mm-hmm. And now, as we're talking about the market, right? Like, and again, I've been doing this for 10 years. So my first year in the industry, I would have listings that sat for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, doing open houses every single weekend or every other weekend. And, you know, now the newbies in the industry, I can say that, right? Because I'm seasoned now.
You sure can.
They're like, I have a listing and it hasn't sold in 4 days. What did I do? My marketing plan isn't working. I'm like, you don't have a marketing plan. You put it online. And now that the market's not, the market's normal. Yeah. It was abnormal. It's not crazy. It's not chaotic. It's none
actually
of that.
Pretty good. I like when buyers and sellers both have a chance to be successful.
Yeah.
You know, it's like 2012, 13, 14. It was kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in any successful negotiation, both parties have to feel like they won.
100%.
Buyers were getting the crap kicked out of them, man. I mean, you saw it.
Yep.
People were just, hey, all right, I'm gonna just shoot me.
There's 16,
I just need somewhere to live.
16 offers, and the thing I didn't like about that was, you know, and listen, I definitely believe like 99.9% of all of our compadres are ethical. I believe that, but it was you want to do the very best for your client possible, but when you're in an environment where it's like, you know, you have 10 houses and you have 1,000 buyers,
mm-hmm.
you know, buyers are desperate.
Yeah.
No wonder the price went up so high. It's just a more ethical way of doing business, I think, when the market is stabilized.
Well,
you know?
Absolutely. It's easier to do that. COVID was a very draining thing because you were consistently trying to manage risk while also trying to give the people what they needed and also being able to disclose and explain things, but say like, hey, I know that you want an inspection and I'm with you. And that's all good. But if you want to win, there's 40 offers on the table and we have to waive everything. And they're
some of them don't have inspections.
And people didn't understand that. Yeah. And you're like, I'm sorry that I have to tell you this, but I have to communicate with you the facts. Like, this is what it is. If you want to win, this is what I think that we should do. And yeah, are you putting yourself at risk? Yes, like 100%. But this is the game that you're playing. So do you want to play or do you not?
Or do you want to sit this one out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you see the market as we're sitting here today and we're filming this thing in the end of September 2022? Where are we now?
Where the market is now is what I said earlier. We are going back to my version of normal, right?
Amen, brother. I like to hear you say that.
My version of normal, and it's going into a normal market, and the media is inflating. You know, all the interest rates are going up, and it's going to be 7% in October. And you know, this article from Facebook says that we're going to be in a bubble, and the housing prices are going to go down 20%. I think that we're insulated in Pittsburgh. I think that California, Texas, Florida, I do think that they'll see a decrease. But this news is being spread nationally, and it really is kind of specific. Like the most cliche statement ever about Pittsburgh is in 2008 and 2009 when the market crashed. We didn't go like this, we went like this, and then we just continued to level up. We're still one of the most affordable cities in the United States.
No question.
That is a fact.
No question.
Prices have, people have gained a lot of equity during COVID. I don't think that it's going to dip. I think that it's going to stabilize. We're going to see it be stagnant. Buying power is most definitely going down. But on the other end, there's more options coming available. So with all this other stuff being said, I think that the market has spiked, and now we are going to stabilize, and then there will be a point in time where it's going to continue to go up. And again, the media and the facts and the statistics nationally, yes, like I'm a very data-driven person that should be looked at. But at the same time, again, managing a team of 26 people, doing about 200 transactions this year, I'm just expressing what I'm seeing from the outside in, and like we're okay.
We are okay.
Buyers are still getting deals, sellers are still getting amazing prices, and it's like, okay, well, you didn't make 120 grand like your neighbor did 6 months ago, but you made 100. Like, hey, look up, you did good.
I know, 100%. And well, the 20 and 21 was just irrational. That's like a once in a lifetime market for sellers. It was just irrational.
It was insane.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I also think that it's naive for people to take national news on housing and then conflate that down to our market. Or consider it to be gospel as it applies to Pittsburgh, because we are kind of a unique market. Pittsburgh is a unique animal.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh is, like I said, insulated. It can be very lucrative here. Things are very high turnover. Yeah, I mean, it's all good.
So before we wrap this up, I want to ask you about younger agents coming into the business. What do you think are the biggest obstacles that they face right now? It could either be theoretically or actually procedurally. What do you think some of the number one difficulties are for them?
The number one difficulty coming into the industry as a young agent is this: there's not much mentorship out there, and they don't have any life experience. So how I talked about my experience as an unlicensed assistant and then my first year and kind of like learning some terminology and like, I kind of have seen from the outside in some like business sense. Without the mentorship, without being taught those certain things, you're in the industry that moves at this pace, and you have to know a little bit enough about financing to be dangerous, a little bit enough about construction to be dangerous. These people haven't even moved out of their parents' house yet. And I was in that boat, I didn't know how an outlet or, what open hot was with an outlet, or what a GFCI was, or how to spot if the roof was near the end of its life. Like, I'm not a contractor. I can't build in mud and finish this wall, but I can tell you probably how it's put up and what it might look behind there and give people enough confidence in me. But I was able to have the experience, to be educated, to have people trust me. A new agent getting into the industry, brokerages will hire anybody with a pulse. So you get there, and then you're off on like this cruise ship with no destination, and you have to fail to learn. And that is not a great way to learn sometimes. Trial and error is not the best. It's, hey, I'm going to teach you this, digest it, and then we're going to give this to you in small doses. And that's one thing that I try to do in my team. And I have a hard time doing it with 26 people.
I'd imagine.
Try doing it with 100. I mean, there's only a couple of us leaders there.
Would you agree, though, ultimately in the end, the young agent has got to really want it? You're not just going to go casually into this and have enough training that it's just going to kind of come to you. You got to really flip and want it.
You have to want it. You have to have the desire to learn. You do. One of the testament to one of the newer agents on my team, his name's Noah, and we use Slack as a communication channel because a group text with 26 people can get really annoying. And I've tried that and it didn't work. But like, one of the things that I love and respect about Noah is he's so driven and he's so curious. And like recently he was like, hey, can I make a channel on Slack where once a week on Monday we're going to learn a new construction or a new construction thing, and we're going to put it out there to the team so that everybody could learn. And I'm like, yeah. So I named the channel. We have like funny names for our channel. I named it Building Noah's Ark. And like today we learned about siding. We talk about how learning that brings value to people, and he's not getting paid to do that.
Understood.
He wants it.
Yeah.
And he's good, and he's already experienced massive success.
That's desire.
And he's going to continue to. You have to want it. No one's going to do it for you.
That's the desire. And the other thing too that I noticed as a middle-aged guy, there was so much about a house that I had no flipping idea. If you had asked me when I moved into my house in 2012, if you'd taken Natalie and I down to the basement, okay, well, where's the hot water tank? I think it's our cylinder thing over there.
Right.
Where there's the furnace, yeah, but what kind of furnace is it? I don't know. Is it high efficiency? Is it venting out the side of your house? Or is it going into your chimney? I don't know.
Yeah.
So much of it, the average person doesn't know. And these are things that you need to not only be exposed to, but you need to learn to be an effective realtor. You have to be able to speak on your feet intelligently. And to learn this stuff, you got to want it.
Yeah.
You got to want
You
to
have to be
know.
genuinely interested.
Generally, like you said earlier, you have to be, I believe, you need to be genuinely curious all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can, and as we were talking earlier about like the ego thing and, you know, falling in life and getting back up, there was a time where I was like, I know it all. I know it all, you know? And then boom, it was like situation happened. I'm like, I don't know anything. I need to learn again. You know, it's like, you have to be open-minded. You have to say to yourself, like, I have an opportunity to learn every single day, and I want to, and I have to.
Was there ever any in your career, any big financial mistakes? You don't even have to identify it, but yeah, something that really, that had you maybe not had as much ego and put a little more due diligence in there personally, you might not have made that mistake.
Yeah, a big one. And it was part of my burnout that I literally crashed and burned.
Okay.
And it was one of the biggest learning lessons in my life. It's one of those ones though where I can say like I tried to learn through trial and error, and I probably lost some years off my life because it stressed me out so bad, and I was in such a bad position. Thank God I have great friends. But just a quick synopsis on the background of my real estate investing career. So when I was 20 years old, I bought a property for $100,000. I bought it in cash, and then I remodeled it as I lived there. So I built a bunch of sweat equity. I had the equity, took a home equity line of credit out, and then I was literally playing real life Monopoly. Back when you can get a house in Robinson Township for $100,000. Man, do we all wish we could see those days again.
Right on.
But I capitalized on it. That one deal changed my life. So I'm listening to one of my mentors about using the bank, using home equity lines. And they're giving me, 90% of what it appraised at, which was 285. And then I took that and I bought a condo. And then I got another one out on the condo. And then I bought, a single family in Robinson. And then I started playing this game and then using the money for renovations and to pay my taxes and to keep up ahead of things. And I was in good debt. And then I had a killer year as a salesperson. And I was like, I bought a duplex in Robinson for $67,000, and it was a total piece of junk. But I was arrogant, and I was, I know everything, and I know this is a good deal, and I didn't do my due diligence. And I went into that property after I closed, and the rim joist that sits on top of the cinder block, I was literally picking it apart with my fingernail. So the rim joist is what your entire structure of your house sits on. So I had to rip it down. Now, if I would have taken 5 freaking seconds to call, I have one of my best friends and mentors in the industry. He owns a construction company. He has the largest restoration company in the city of Pittsburgh. He is a construction genius. I'm friends with all of his foremen. I mean, I love these guys. They love me back.
One call would have solved that.
They would have helped
problem.
me.
Yeah.
They would have said like, here's what to do. And I would have paid them. I would have just said, but no, I'm stubborn and I need to just do this on my own. And this was 2 years ago. It was very recent. And I tore the house down. And then when I tore the house down, the west foundation wall kicked off the footer in demolition. So I had to rebuild that foundation wall. And I'm in $150,000 before I'm even started.
Wow.
And then my budget for the project was $200,000, and I ended up in it $525. Wow. And I used cash.
Wow.
And when I tell you I couldn't pay my bills,
Wow.
I sold my house to pay off debt, and then I was living with my construction buddy, who I should have called, above his garage. And I mean, he has an extremely nice house, so it was a nice place to live for a couple months. And it broke me. I couldn't believe that I put myself in that kind of financial position. And if I would have taken the time to just take a deep breath and say, okay, here's where I'm at, here's the palette. Because I'm a resourceful person, but I wasn't in this time in my life, and I don't know why. And I think it was because I had so much cash and I was making so much money that I was like, no, I am the bank. Like, I'm gonna float this one. But if I would have taken the time to just ask for help, people will help you if you ask. And
it's
I didn't.
Important lesson learned.
And I got burned. But then, I slowly recouped, and I had no debt on the property. I rented each side out for $19.50 a side, so I'm cash flowing great, right? Because I don't have a loan on that property, and now I think it's worth what I actually put into it. So by the grace of God, it all worked out. But man, that was not a good
stress
feeling.
and pain to go through. I thought I had a pretty good story until I listened to that one. I was just going to say I went to a guitar show after a couple years of success, and these other dealers were. I never did vintage guitars. I would always do like late model. Since the vintage game is something totally different. When you're buying guitars that are 30, 40, 50 years old, you need to know that history, know the brands, right? And I'm like, walk around with a sizable chunk of change in my pocket, I'm doing well. So I went and bought this vintage guitar because I just thought I knew everything and realized that I probably overpaid by $30,000. And I found out at the end of the show that when I showed it to someone that knew, said, "You made a bad buy." I tried to go back and exchange it back when that dealer was like, buyer's remorse. So I made a $30,000 error out of pure arrogance when all I would have had to have done was just had the humility to ask someone else in the business, "Hey, is this a good buy?" And they could have said, "Absolutely not."
Yeah, getting a little bit more information before
But I like you said, you know everything, right? I know what I'm doing. Look at me. I grew this business in 2 years. Look who I am. I'm Boogie Street. I don't need that. Yeah, you learn quick, but that's nothing compared to what you just went through.
one of my buddies in the industry, a couple years before I started the School Street project, he was like, "Yeah, no, I had this deal go on and I lost $40,000." And I'm sitting there and I'm like, how do you just lose $40,000? I mean, I was sick to my stomach.
Right.
And then as I'm losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm like,
how you lose
$40,000. Hundreds of grand over budget. And I'm like, man, I wish that I was him,
Yeah. When you wish your pain isn't quite as much. No, I totally get it, buddy. But I can't thank you enough for doing this, man.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate you having me on. It was fun.
Yeah, and I wanted to hear a little bit about your story too. We do panel shows on here where I sit with 4 people. I try to bring them with. Sometimes I do it with diverse backgrounds, but I'm thinking about doing some real estate shows and incorporating it into the project. So if you're game, I like to.
Yeah,
have
I'm
you
in,
come
man.
back on.
I love doing this stuff. This is one of those things that it's just it's a fun thing to do and to connect with you. And I think that journaling is a really important part of life, and I never take the time to do that, but I like to speak. So I'll go home after this and feel good. Anytime I do something like this, I feel better and I learn as well, which again, expanding your knowledge is important. But
it's expression. Okay, and the essence of why we're doing it is that I noticed a couple years ago that I wasn't having any good conversations with anybody. I would call my buddy on the phone, or I'd a bunch of text messages, and all the conversations I were having were necessary conversations, but they were generally real estate based if I did have a verbal conversation. I just miss the era before, the web and social media, where we used to sit and talk and communicate, even in a coffee shop or over a beer. Now it's so rare that we're sitting and really having second level communication, not just the cursory stuff. And I think that's why, in my opinion, why podcasting in general is a hit with people, because they'll invest the time to listen. It's a shame that they're not having the conversation themselves, but they'll actually watch other people having long second level conversations. It's a fascinating thing to me.
It is.
Because we're not getting it in real life.
Correct. Yeah, and real life and getting deep and talking about some of this stuff, it allows you to dissect it and talking about past failures. And it's like, oh my God, you were that way too. It makes me feel better and other people
100%.
feel better. And it's, it's
and we
just
learn,
a cool thing.
even if we're not sitting down to intently thinking about learning, by ingesting it and rationalizing it, we're constantly learning, but dude, it means a lot to me, Christian.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I appreciate
partner.
you having me on, man.
We'll do it again.
Anytime. I'm
All
in.
right. Friends, we're out.